What's up, guys? Welcome to the Front Row Dads podcast. I'm your host, John Vroman, and today we're talking about getting angry at your kids, unaccepted apologies, and how to transcend trauma. My guest is Curt Storring. He's a father of 3 boys, a husband of 10 years, an entrepreneur, and a men's group facilitator. He started dad.work. In fact, I stumbled upon something he wrote on Instagram, knew we had a lot to talk about, and here's why. He helps dads become better men, partners, and fathers. He wants to share the tools, practices, and wisdom learned on his own journey from being a miserable, angry dad to now a calm, confident leader. And this conversation is going to take you into the depths, the darkness, and the reality of what he has faced as a father and how he has improved. We'll get into things like the foundation of love, learning respect for kids, connecting with children, the importance of grandpa and how to nurture that relationship. We'll talk about his breakdown in Thailand that led to a huge breakthrough, and ultimately, like I said, how he's navigated the darkest parts of his journey. And guys, know we always have options. Gentlemen, as this show is being released, we're about a week away from our Thriving Marriage Online Summit that's happening May 19th. And I can't wait to get there because our guest is Dr. Kelly Flanagan. This is an event designed and facilitated by the one and only Steve Burchard. It's for men only. It's open to Front Row Dad members and those thinking about being Front Row Dad members. We'll have guys from all over the world, but if you are ready to get the strategies, to have the real conversations that are going to help you to create a thriving marriage at home, then this is the event for you. Hey, if your marriage is an amazing place, my guess is you probably want to see what else is out there. What's next level look like for you? And if you're in the depths of despair and things are falling apart and you're in a dark season, then get onto this event with men from all over that are going to have some real conversations that most men will never have. And we're going to talk about the strategies here that will help you. Actionable ideas that you can implement right away when you leave this event to create a better marriage at home. Guys, I also want to tell you that we're opening up our membership for a couple of days next week. If you're on the wait list, you'll get an email telling you about the steps that you need to take to explore membership opportunities. We're going to fill 20 spots. And if you resonate with being a family man with a business, not a businessman with a family, then this group may be for you. We are currently at 260 members from 15 different countries, and we're growing stronger and stronger with every new member. If you want to join the wait list, get information, go to frontrowdads.com, or you can always just email our team, info@frontrowdads.com. If you've got questions, we'll help you out. Also, guys, I want to mention, this is really exciting. December 2nd through the 4th, we're hosting our first live event open to all dads who choose to be family men with businesses, not businessmen with families. So members, those who are thinking about being members, this is an open event. We are going to be releasing ticket sales around Father's Day, mid-June, and you'll be hearing all about it. This is December 2nd through the 4th in Austin, Texas. It's going to be a huge event. Little teaser, one of my great friends, author of The Miracle Morning, Hal Elrod, is going to be at the event speaking. One of my other great friends, Preston Smiles, you may be familiar with his work, just an incredible leader, father, and he is going to be speaking at the event. I'm not going to tell you much more because I'm going to trickle out some really cool things that are happening here at the first ever live Front Row Dad event open to anybody out there who chooses to be a family man with a business, not a businessman with a family. And I repeat that on purpose. Guys, we're going to just right now get into this conversation with Curt. I know you're going to enjoy it. It may be worth listening to twice. He shares some real wisdom here, guys. So slow it down, pause it, rewind it. Make sure that you're capturing these ideas, thinking about them during your morning routines, during your meditations. And remember, this is a process, guys. It is a process. It's not something that you learn about one time and then you've got it all dialed in and you're never going to get angry again and you're going to connect with your kids every single day. It is a practice that we work on. It's why we keep talking. It's why we keep strategizing. It's why we keep revealing ourselves, why we keep showing up for each other so that we can experience this fatherhood journey together. And guys, we're going to pick up this interview where I'm talking to him about a moment where he got angry at his kids. Let's get into it. We are going to dig in today, right off the bat, to a story, Curt, I was hoping you could share with us. You got angry at your oldest son recently. Angry might not be the word you would use. I might be filling in a blank there. There was
overwhelmed and angry would be, yeah, very accurate.
Okay, all right, cool. I didn't want to put words in your mouth, but there's a story around forgiveness and there's a story around sovereignty of your son. Tell us that story, man. I'm excited to hear it and share it with the guys.
Yeah, thank you. So I used to be like a really angry dad. This was my thing. This was why I got into this work in the first place, because I was ruining my relationship with my kids and my wife. I was scary. I was mean. And so this is why I started doing all this work in the first place. And so about a month or two ago, I was putting all the kids to bed, all three of them. My wife was at, her women's circle meeting. And this is usually fine. Love doing it. Love reading stories with them. Love that connection before bed. But the baby was really cranky this night. And so I'm holding him. He's not going to sleep. He's screaming in my ear. The boys, the bigger boys, they sleep in the same room. Their beds are beside each other. And they're just like kicking each other. And I was like, guys, it's time for bed. Time to turn the lights off. And they just wouldn't stop. It's one of those times they're having fun. They love wrestling. They love kicking each other. And I'm like, this is getting overwhelming for me. Baby screaming in one ear. I've only got one hand with which to try and separate the boys as I move in to say, guys, it's time for bed. And as all this is happening, I'm getting sort of like kicked in the meantime. And my threshold for like patience is just going down to like 2, 1, 0%. And at that moment, I just screamed at my oldest and I unloaded in a way that I hadn't in years. And it scared the bejesus out of him, man. Like he was just beside himself. And I just berated him and I shamed him and I was big and scary and they stopped. Whew, thank goodness they stopped. I could finally get the baby to sleep. But in those 15 minutes of silence from my other boy's room, as I put the baby to sleep, I just went, oh no, not again. Like, what have I done? This was not me anymore. This was me 5-10 years ago. What's happened? Like, am I back here now? And so thankfully, in doing all of this sort of internal healing and growth work, I'm pretty good at processing these things now. So I was immediately like, my bad. I was overwhelmed, didn't like being kicked, wasn't very happy that you guys weren't going to bed. Simply my fault for reacting that way. And so baby goes down, I go back in and I'm like, I'm sorry. What I did was because of how I was feeling. I explained how I was feeling. And I said, I'm sorry. And I just went to give him a hug and he sort of like shrugged me off. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Did you hear that? I was just waiting for him to be like, oh, Dad, it's okay. Of course. Like, come on. And I was like, how are you feeling right now? And he says, full of rage. I was like, oh, wow. Okay. What does that feel like? He's like, oh, just like red, hot. And so I was doing these things, which I think are pretty healthy, like getting him to say what he's feeling and like how that feels in his body. So I'm feeling pretty good about myself. It's like, yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And I was like, let's hug. Let's get this over with. And he's like, nope, don't want to do that. And, it seems strange telling that story. It's kind of like, oh, whatever. But in my heart, I had this immense fear. Because in that moment, I realized that he was in charge of the repair, not me. And that at any moment, he could choose not to come back to me. And that meant that he held the key to my heart. He could destroy my heart at any time. And this, I think, is the foundation of love. It's trusting someone with your heart, knowing they could break it at any moment, but trusting that they won't. And in this moment, I realized that. And here he was, like, not ready to connect. And he's never done that before. I've always been able to scoop him up. Might take a little while. I might need to really chill. But because I was so quick in healing this one, he hadn't. And so I left his room. I was like, hey, I'm going to give you some time. And I was like almost panicking. I felt like hyperventilating. I was like, wow, did I just lose him? And of course, my head goes to all sorts of terrible places. Like, you're never going to get him back. You just ruined everything. Your anger is the cause of this disconnect. And like, what if he never wants to hug you again? And man, that level of fear, knowing that it's out of my control when everything seems in my control as a father, when I want to control everything as a father, when I just expect their kids, they'll come back to me. Man, did I ever learn respect for him? Like, realizing that, like you said, he is a sovereign individual. He gets to decide when he's able to come back and forgive me and welcome me back into his heart. And that was so devastating for that half hour to an hour before he was able to let me back in. And thank goodness he did. He said, Dad, can you come back? And he said, I forgive you and I'm okay now. And so we hugged and I started crying. It's like, oh man, like I feel like I almost lost this. Yeah. And in that moment, actually like a little bit of a meta point. I had a hard time connecting with my oldest son, really hard time. It was like challenging birth, challenging post-birth period, really young, under-resourced in terms of like emotional ability. And I'd always felt like arm's length. Nothing could ever really get us closer. And I'd spent a long time trying to get there. And in this moment, I realized like, I actually did it. I'm actually so close to him that I care more than anything in the world that he's rejecting me. So there was this beautiful lesson in forgiveness, sovereignty, and realizing that all of my hard work to connect had actually worked. And man, I don't want to lose that.
How have you learned to connect with him more, like as you have grown, into your own role as a father? What are the little ways that you've slowly been gaining traction in building your relationship with him? Is it one-to-one time? Is it, something in the morning, habits, routines, rituals? What's getting you there?
Yeah, it's been a lot of just accepting he is who he is. I wanted to make sure he was a certain way. I wanted to do things my way. And the more I've been able to sort of relax and slow down and just acknowledge him for who he is. An example of this is he was really into Pokemon cards a few years ago. He still is, but the story starts a few years ago. And I went to my men's group and I was like, guys, I want to connect with my son, but all he wants to do is play Pokemon cards. Like, what can I do? And they're like, dude, just play Pokemon cards with him. Because it's not about the thing, it's about the time. It's like, oh, duh. So here I go. And I, learned about Pokemon cards. I hadn't played them since I was a kid. And we just started playing. And it was like in that time, he's not going to remember like, oh, I love that particular Pokemon card game. It's going to be like, oh, I love when my dad spent time with me. And he asked me questions because we don't just sit and play, we talk and we joke and all this kind of stuff. And so like just accepting that he was going to be into whatever he was going to be. And it's my job to like support him in that and to guide him, not to control him. And that has looked like playing Pokemon cards. It's looked like asking about his days. It's looked like being okay with what he wants to read because he's a voracious reader. And I'm like, oh, some of those things are pretty nerdy, man. Like I don't tell him this, but like in my head, I'm going, oh, I hope he doesn't grow up to be like, bullied in school because of what he's reading, and all these like ideas come because I know what it's like to have whatever happened to you based on this. So my control was out of love. Like, hey, don't do this because I know later on it's going to get you into trouble. And like, oh man, thank goodness I just saved you a year of pain, right? But instead he learns, oh, my choices and my beliefs don't matter. Like dad has to control everything. I guess like I'm not actually all that important. And so just releasing that and being more supportive, even just like wrestling more with him, that came so hard for me. I listened to a lot of dads be like, oh, wrestle time is so fun. I'm just like, why do I have resistance to this? I do. I don't know why, but I do. And just starting to play like, we play keep away. I'll just like grab a ball and they have to come get it from me. And they love that. And so just like opening myself up to doing things that I don't really want to do, but that they want to do with me because it's important just to be together. That's been probably like the biggest thing overall.
Yeah, very cool. Let's talk about this connection point, but not as it relates to your son. Let's talk about the connection as we go back into a generation, your grandfather. You have a story with your grandfather, and I think that there's something to be learned there, that there is a bridge and a tie to what we're talking about right now. Tell us the time, I think you had a breakdown with your grandfather, right?
Yeah, that was a fun one. This was fundamental to my journey. And I think, honestly, it was the closest I've ever had to an initiatory experience. And so I'd love to hear the connection that you make between this and the first story. So please jump in afterwards. But I meet regularly with my grandfather. Every 2 weeks, we have lunch together. We smoke a cigar. We have a glass of wine. It's just a wonderful time. And he is a mentor and an elder, and in some ways, like a father figure to me. And we spent a lot of time growing up as my childhood was such that I just happened to spend a good deal of time being raised by them as my mother and father were dealing with other things. And so nowadays we meet regularly. And in this moment, I was in a period of my life where I was blaming my parents. I saw what was wrong with me, or I perceived to be wrong with me. I saw my emotional pain that I was going through. And I thought at the time it was because of my mom and my dad, how they parented me, my dad for divorcing my mom for not being able to deal with that very well, for getting sick for like 10 years. And I was just telling them like, oh man, if they could just I want them to like say sorry to me. And I just want them to be bigger than me. I wanted to be the kid for once because I felt like an adult from my earliest memories, always having to hold space. And I would just complain. And then after I had complained, I felt like, okay, all the complaints were gone, but what's this thing underneath? And so I just kept speaking. And I told my granddad, I feel like a 3-year-old who just wants mommy and daddy to be there for him. And then I started crying. Like I just started bawling, man. And I don't know where it came from. I wasn't consciously thinking about that, but it was the underpinning, what I've come to believe now, like my deepest core wound, a wound of abandonment, of neglect, of just not having anyone be there bigger than me to hold space for my emotions. And he just put a hand on me and he let me cry. And that was so powerful because he didn't try and fix. He just validated and affirmed, much like I now see is so important with my own children. And then we just had a conversation and he continued to hold that space week after week until I'd continue to work it out with him and with the men in my men's groups and inside my own heart journaling. But man, that was the start of me finally realizing like, oh, what does adult Curt look like? Who am I if I'm not that 3-year-old? And it led to an intense period of grief. I had to let go of the idea that I would ever get that which I wanted more than anything, which is to be that 3-year-old boy with a loving family. I just wanted that. And it's like, dude, you'll never get that. You're like a 30-year-old man. You're not going to get that ever again. So let it die. And I had to move through and sit with that deep grief to finally clear it from my like emotional body, if you will. Man, that was powerful. That was the start of a really deepening and maturing in my journey.
Have you explored reparenting? Yeah. It'd be interesting. Have you interviewed Charles Clay?
No.
We interviewed him on the show recently and he does some inner peace. He does an inner peace process and he does a lot of work with reparenting. And I think you would enjoy a chat with him. I should connect you guys at some point.
Beautiful, please.
Okay. So the connection, I mean, you actually, I think you said it a little bit too, but you said, I want them to say sorry. Like that was right. You're like, I want them to say sorry. In many ways, the connection that I see is like your son was hurt. He felt rage. And what he got from you was that you were ultimately, you were apologizing. And that's a way that we heal. A lot of times we want somebody just to say, I'm sorry. I had this, I had a challenge with somebody in my life not too long ago, and it seemed to be unresolvable, this challenge that I had. And then I went through this breathwork class and I came out one day and I had this like immediate clear thought of, I need to call that person and just apologize. Like not for anything even specific, but just like everything, like anything I've ever done to hurt you. I just want to say, I'm sorry. Well, dude, I called this person and I'm like, I had this moment of clarity in the breathwork class and I'm just calling to say, I'm really sorry. I don't even know what I'm sorry for because there's so much, but I just want to say that if I've ever done anything to hurt you, if I said something, if I showed up with certain energy, if I just wasn't there when you needed me or whatever, I just want you to know that I'm really sorry for that. And I'll tell you, this person called me later and told me everything in their heart shifted the minute I said, I'm really sorry. They go, everything shifted. It was like, I could just go on. It was like, everything was just okay again. Even if you didn't, like they say, apologies need to be really specific and you need to apologize for this very specific thing. I think there's a moment when that's true. A lot of times an apology can be very specific and without it, it's like, well, what are you sorry for? But I was like really clear that I go, I don't even know what I'm sorry for. I just know that my heart says, I'm really sorry. Because I know what I'm sorry is not being at my best at all times. I know my energy's off. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry when I bring my shit into your world and you're impacted by it, right? But it's my shit. I just know it overflows into other people's worlds when we collide. So I think there's that. And then there's also this, I want them to be there for me. When you go back to that moment with your son where you scream and you yell and you're disappointed, what I think, if I'm putting myself back into when I was that child, it's the fracturing of something. It's a disconnect. You're like, that person doesn't think I'm great anymore. That person is so angry. I'm really not good enough. Our relationship might break. Maybe they'll go away forever, right? We're never going to be the same again. I remember having those moments with my parents where something would happen and I'm like, I don't know if we're ever going to be the same ever again after this. And there's a death in that, it seems, right? Like a story that we once told about how epic the relationship was. And now that story is fractured because now there's a new story, which is, right? It hasn't been all rainbows and unicorns. So that's the tie that I see between this. Is like people, you to your grandfather and you to your son, just ultimately people wanting to be connected and feeling disconnected in moments, and then coming back together because we know how to show up, not just with an apology with our words, but an apology with our spirit. Like there's a stillness that we bring to somebody and they can feel it, which is why an apology with words doesn't always work. But man, when your heart shifts, there's something very intuitive that people can read into. They're like, I get it now. That person, I know they mean it. So I think that's the time.
Hey guys, quick break here to talk about a new program that we launched a few months ago, and it's having a huge impact. It's called the Summit Series, and here's how it works. Every 60 days, we take a breather from the business and focus on improving life at home. So over 12 months, we take guys through the complete fatherhood journey, covering all 6 pillars, all of the bases to make sure that you're making progress in the areas of life that matter most. Now, we've all seen, and we've likely been this guy at times, a hard-charging business dude who spends the majority of their hours focused on growing the business while investing in the family takes a backseat. And I've heard the phrase, I've said the phrase, hey, I just got to get through the busy season. Well, for most, the busy season never ends. And we just are one of those guys who gets to the end of their life saying, I wish I would have spent more time with my family. So to ensure that that does not happen to you or anyone in our community, we created a program to keep us all on track. It's a space to get focused on how to take our families to the next level. So here's a few reasons why the impact has been so profound of the Summit Series. Number one, it's a giant pattern interrupt. While many of us have been very intentional about creating habits and routines and rituals that help us to thrive, they can also hurt us if we don't have moments where we break away, take a day, and see things from a different angle. We all know the difference of like a 5, 10, or 15-minute meeting at work where we might be able to address one thing. It's very topical, and where we can step away off-site, one-day planning session where big moves are made. And that's what this is for our families. We also know that, it's not always about new ideas. It's about true ideas. So while we're all interested in novelty, we have to be careful of that. And we have to remember that we want the principles also that have been tested over decades and centuries and, that work for not just one family, but many families. So our summits are a mix of new and true ideas that serve men. We also believe in blind spots. It's one thing to go out and listen to a podcast like, hey, you're listening to one now, or to listen to an audiobook or sit and read a book, but that's one directional. You just are getting the content plugged into your head and you're able to contemplate it, and it does serve a purpose. But there's a totally different level of learning when you're in conversation with somebody who's hearing what you're saying, challenging your thoughts, getting vulnerable with you, reflecting back, giving you specific targeted ideas. And so within our brotherhood, that is what makes this Summit Series very different than any other type of learning that most men are getting exposed to. And lastly, one of the big reasons that guys benefit from the Summit Series is you're watching how other people design and facilitate conversations. So you're getting the benefit of learning from Steve Burchard, our designer and facilitator. He's one of the top facilitators in the world. And you can bring these same principles on how to host an online gathering like this to lead your business and other groups that you care about, your church groups, your family, and whatever it might be, men's groups that you're a part of in other industries. So learning to lead in this way, guys constantly walk away and say, not only did I walk away with amazing content, but I got great ideas of how I could run my meetings, which is fantastic. So if you want the best for your family, then you should have the best training. And we're the first company to address this topic specifically for high-performing entrepreneurial businessmen. So rather than me talking about it anymore, here's what one of our attendees has to say about the Summit Series.
I just wanted to share some gratitude. This event was really one of the reasons I wanted to jump in to make connections. And there wasn't a single person that I interacted with who was not just on such a high level. Everyone was committed to being here, to being a part of this process, learning and growing and supporting each other. So I'm super grateful to everyone that I interacted with and to be a part of the brotherhood. So I'm looking forward to just taking everything to the next level with you guys. So thank you.
All right, guys, to register for the next Summit event or become a Summit Series member, which I recommend within the brotherhood, go to frontrowdads.com and click join the brotherhood today.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful, man. There's so much in there, like forgiveness. There's a lot of work you can do with your own father if you are a father. Can you forgive your father? Have you forgiven your father? Have you seen that he was once an innocent baby and he lived his whole life? Can you forgive him? Not the other way around. Like, oh man, that's deep work that we do in men's work sometimes. And like you said, the ability to apologize, man, that will repair so many ruptures with your kids. You don't have to be right all the time. You're allowed to screw up. You can show your kids humility, and you can bridge that gap back to the place of repair, so that story that you're saying, that like fractured story, doesn't stay fractured. It comes back to the whole, and there might be a crack there forever that they're aware of, but they're like, oh, that's part of it, and I still feel supported. So I love telling guys that like apologies are not weak to anyone, but especially not your kids. And like the amount of times I've had to apologize, and it's not groveling. It's not like, oh, please forgive me. It's like, hey man, I screwed up. Here's why. Here's what I noticed. How does that feel for you? And I'm sorry. And like you said, that heartfelt, like I could feel your heartfeltness from here as you explain your sort of forgiveness story to the person in your life. Like that makes all the difference. Can you feel that deeply with your kids to give them that? I think that's a gift.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you spent some time in Thailand, and you had a personal breakthrough there. So do we have time for that story?
Yeah. I mean, I've had a lot of breakdowns over the years. I've had a lot of times that,
but they always lead to a breakthrough for you, Curt. So.
Dude, they do. And I love being triggered actually because of this, because in the moment it sucks, but like a couple of days later, it's like, oh, there's some work to do. Let's go do it. But yeah, we were living in Thailand for 2 years. We did Thailand, we did Eastern Europe, back to Thailand. Crazy, living experience. Got to do that because we have this online business that we run. And man, when you get thrown out of your comfort zone and all of your habits go by the wayside because you don't even know where to get groceries, like how am I going to eat today? I don't speak the language. I don't know how to go to like the grocery store. I don't know where the restaurants are. And suddenly you're faced with all that. You're not going to the gym. You're not meditating because you're jet lagged. It's like, wow, do things ever come to the surface? And so here I am, just at the start of my journey of meditating and getting better as a father and a husband. And I'm scared. Like my kids are also feeling uncomfortable. Obviously, they've been taken from their home, and they're loud, they're screaming, they're overwhelmed, they're triggering me with their noise. And my fear response says, if you don't make them stop screaming, you're going to get kicked out. Because like these Thai people, they're very like calm and quiet. They're not going to understand. They're going to make you leave. And if you have to leave this apartment that you've paid for, like, where do you even go? You have no one here. And so my fear was so great. I would like. And I hate to even admit this. This is one of the things I share in like the secrets process we do in group, which is like something I don't want you to know is like I would cover my kid's mouth with my hand because I needed it to stop. I needed the noise and the screaming to stop. But man, I paid a price for that in my heart. I knew it was wrong. I knew I needed to be resourced. And one time, one of the few times in Thailand where I felt rock bottom was I just remember lying on this concrete floor, sobbing again. There's a lot of tears here that helps to move a lot of emotion. And I was just like pounding on this concrete floor. It was cold, air conditioning was on, just pounding on this, crying like, why can't I do any better? I keep coming back to this anger and this rage. And I could just see like, if I don't stop, I will lose everything. Everything. My wife will take my kids back to Canada and divorce me. My kids will hate me. Like I can't even imagine. They're like 3 and 1 years old. If this is going to be their father, like how could they possibly grow up healthy like that? And I just had this like realization that I had to go all in on me. And that was hard because like you're supposed to, as a father, you always hear like, oh, sacrifice yourself for your kids and your wife. And I was like, no, I'm the biggest problem in their life. I got to sort me out. And so this, like what felt like rock bottom, I was going to lose everything, turned into the motivation to spend the next, like, I think that was 6 years ago, just to spend like every waking moment trying to get better as a human being and as a man and healing myself and doing, like you said, breath work, meditation, journaling, reading like hundreds of books, going to courses, getting coaches, all this stuff, because I was just so bad for them and I didn't know why. And so that was like the moment that I decided to go all in on this journey. And so that was number one. I had another point where these things were. Hold
on. Before you go on.
Yeah.
Is there a pattern with noise for you? Is that the trigger?
A lot of times, yeah. It's like this overwhelm in the nervous system.
How much have you explored that? The noise element?
Yeah, quite a lot. I mean, I've recognized that it is a thing. It's a thing for my wife and I. Touch is another big thing. And I know that there's a lot of sort of interest in the nervous system with things like this, with triggers that are auditory or touch based.
Like somebody touching your face or your,
yes.
Like, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, I get so triggered when my kids touch my face.
Yeah, man.
I'm like, I will literally punch you in your jaw if you touch my face again, dude. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. I just had to ask because I think that's really interesting. And here's why I bring that up. You're the canvas in which we're kind of exploring right now, but it's like for guys, like what are those patterns in your lives that cause you to be triggered? Because if that's the case and you pick up on that, you're like, it's noise. And you could just sit down and calmly share that with your family. Like, I am just triggered by noise. This is the thing. Like, we don't have to get into all of what it means or why noise or all that, but I just wanted to mention that because I think that type of awareness, as we see it within you, your vulnerability, your courage to share these stories, we can see a little bit of ourselves in you. So my question for the guys would be like, if there's 3 things that trigger you, what are they? And then when's the last time you talked about it with your wife or your kids or your buddies?
Totally.
Your men that you connect with.
There's 2 practices that come up, which I've done to get here. One of them is simply like writing down every time you get angry in the week and then coming back the week after and categorizing like, what was the why behind this? And you'll get pretty quick, like a series of 1 to 3 things that's like, loud noises, being touched, lack of control in my business, like whatever it is, you'll come up with this list. Another thing I've done is actually recorded a meditation that I came up with. It's on Insight Timer. And I just started visualizing what would trigger me in that day. It's like, hey, my kids are going to trigger me 100%. Just like acknowledge that. Now, what might it be? Okay, fighting with each other, making loud noises, screaming, hitting me. These are things. So I would visualize one thing. And I would
the life of a child. You just described the life of a child.
So apparently I just get triggered by children. Anyway, you ask yourself the most charitable way, like, why might they be doing that behavior? Yeah. And then you go into like, okay, can you visualize yourself actually acting calmly in response to this? And it helps build this like neural network or whatever, where you can actually do that in person next time. Those are a couple of things I've done. You
had a second part of this story. I cut you off, but did you have something else?
Do you have time?
Yeah, I do. I can go a little over here if you do.
The only reason that I wanted to share this was because I think that my story can give hope to guys who are in a place that feels hopeless.
Let's go, man.
This was the second sort of big blow up in Thailand where I just, again, couldn't figure it out. Like, why am I doing this? It was like a year later, things were, going okay, but then I just kept blowing up. And it got to a point where my knowledge, I knew in my head, not in my heart, but in my head, that my kids and my wife would be better off without me. And what that looked like for me wasn't running away. And so obviously the other alternative to that was like, maybe I need to like be dead. And that was a dark place. And I don't know what, like I got to the point where I was looking up like ways to do this that wouldn't be like gruesome for the kids and the wife to find. Like I was starting to get too serious for my own liking, and something, gave me the grace or the space to be like, okay, just try one more day. And man, like that, coming from that, even though I knew the statistics for what fatherless homes looked like for children, I was certain I was worse than those outcomes. And so I only share that because that was probably the darkest point in my whole journey. And I have been able to get beyond it. And I just want to make sure that any guy who's ever in that place knows that your kids are literally never better off without you in the picture. It might take some work for you to heal. It might take some work for you to grow. But dude, like there is never a moment of hopelessness as long as you're willing to wake up and show up. And so I just wanted to get that out there because it's very important to me that guys don't ever feel like there's no options, because I'm living proof that you can turn your life around even coming from that dark of a place.
Curt, thanks for being the real deal here, man, and opening up and being honest about your struggles. You've obviously had a lot of victories too. We didn't talk about all those today, but you've been wildly successful in many areas of life. When you look at you, you look like a peaceful, loving, easygoing, he talked to you is like, oh, Curt's voice is so calming. And, but dude, I've known enough people now in my 46 years of being on this planet to know that I know a lot of people who have that, and they also have a lot of other sides of them, a lot of real pain, a lot of struggles, a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes that you've been courageous enough to open up and talk about today. And because of that, I think a lot of people will benefit. And what a great reminder you left us with today about being there for our kids. And that's so very important. I've shared before, I was at a retreat one time, there's about 50 guys in the room, and I asked how many had thought about taking their own lives, and more than half the hands went up. And these are wildly successful, very cool people who've all had that thought show up in their mind. And I think it's probably more common than it's not to explore what that might be. And I really appreciate what you said. Men, you need to be here, and you need to be in conversation and connection with other guys to navigate these dark times in life. There was a man here locally in Austin who took his life recently, a father. And I think about it every day. And I think about those moments in my life when it's so dark, you can't see your way through it. And it feels like there's just no other alternative, but there is. And you just need to brace and weather the storm and reach out to somebody and tell them what's going on and connect. And we need you here. Curt, thank you again for being with us. Guys, if you heard me at the end of our part 1 interview with Curt, I talked about his group. He has an organization that you can go learn about that supports dads. He has some great content through his social media channels, which you can go and explore. We'll link to all that at frontrowdads.com. And Curt, I hope this is the beginning of many great conversations that we have when you're in Austin. Stop by, see the Vromans. Anything else you want to say before we sign off?
No, I just appreciate you. And I want to make sure your audience listens to your episode on my podcast as well, because that was a great chat. So I just appreciate you, man. I appreciate your vulnerability and your open-heartedness, because I can feel it from all the way up here. And yeah, man, looking forward to connecting in the months and years to come.
Thanks, brother.
Gentlemen, thanks for listening to the show today. 2 actions to take from here. First, implement one thing that you learned from the interview. And number 2, share this episode with somebody who values being a family man with a business. If you're enjoying the Front Row Dad podcast, the biggest thanks we ever get are honest reviews. So thank you for your feedback in advance. We read all of them. And if you want to learn more about the Brotherhood, which is our private community of 200 men from 6 different countries, visit frontrowdads.com for more info. If you're wondering what the hell the Brotherhood is all about, I'll leave you with some real feedback from guys who are active members and why they are part of our crew. Thanks again for listening to the show, and I'll catch you on the next episode.
You have this passion for wanting to find a way to make you a better parent and a better husband, just better in general. And so you develop this community of like-minded men that aspire to be better and aspire to put family first and business second. And so to me, there's no greater place I'd rather be. People ask me all the time, like, if I could only pick one group, mastermind, organization, whatever to be part of besides my own, it's always yours. And that's it. And by the way, part of that has to do with you and the leader you are and the way that you treat people and how you show up and the level of preparation that you have and the quality and amount of value that you offer. And then part of it's in the community that's been assembled and these unbelievable like-minded men that show up willing and ready to serve and to give and to share. And so to me, there's no better place that I can be spending my time. I look at 2 different things that we can be doing with our time. One of them is growing relationships and starting first with the most important relationships. And the other one is growing our financial acumen and our wealth to be able to do the things that we want to do and have impact and be able to spend time with the people that we value most by buying that time back. So to me, what you do and what I do is a great marriage of what I think is most important. And I would also throw in there that health is, the other component of that. And I feel like the community that you've built, that each of us have built, is also centered around that, because you talk about being a great husband, parent, that's going to come from taking care of yourself and making sure that you have the energy to be able to serve. And I do the same thing on a wealth standpoint, because wealth to me is not just about money. It's actually about having the time and the space to have your personal health. I would take having great health over no money any day of the week, rather than the inverse of that, having a lot of money but no health. So to me, those are like the 3 most important components. And to me, we're always merging those 3 in the things that we each do. And so I think that's why there's a lot of crossover of, members. That's why what you do resonates so much with me. What I do resonates so much with you. I joined as a lifetime member for that small little window where you offered it. I'm like, I'm in, because I know if I'm going to commit my time anywhere, this is it, because it makes me a better man, makes me a better husband, makes me a better father. It encourages me to really step up my peer group with other like-minded men so that I can be on mission, on point with other people that will hold me accountable at the highest level.
John and I met 1.5 years ago with the launch of my first book. And as we were going through the interview, I began to ask him questions about the Brotherhood, and it resonated within me that a community community of like-minded, like-hearted men that wanted to win, as he was just saying, at business and in life. And I'd reverse that. I wanted to win as a dad, and then I'd also love to be successful in business, because I feel like if I don't get the dad right, who cares what I did in business? That's my legacy. That's what lives beyond me. So to tribe up with a bunch of dudes going in the same direction with the pillars that are in place and the way that not only are you encouraged, compelled, you're chided, you're laughed with, but you get to pace yourself, but you can get around a band of dudes that you can trust, you can share with, you can grow with. And just recently completed a time with these guys. We did a fast at the start of the new year. Every day I would tune in to the little app where we were sharing comments, and I was so impressed how you could see guys that were further down the road and things like this, guys that were just starting, and the camaraderie, the encouragement. So for myself, this was a total fit, and I would encourage any dude that's looking for a place where you can feel connected with a band of guys wanting to go in the same direction. Front Row Dads is for you.